So I think that was one of the things that I implemented was more of a broad umbrella consulting agreement that's sent off to clients now, so they can just broadly agree to us helping them with bioinformatics support. And then we can obviously have emails back and forth as far as a less detailed scope. So we still have the details of the project in writing, but we don't have it under the legal umbrella where it's in a contract where we have to adjust and have appendices over and over again. Because what we were finding is you're spending more time in the legal department than you are doing scientific research, which is not beneficial to anybody. And of course, it's without an attorney on retainer full time, you're having to deal with the companies having to pay those attorneys, and it wasn't cost effective for them either. So streamlining that process has helped a lot, not only with advancing research at a quicker pace, but also reducing the cost for the clients on the legal side.
Hey, good morning. And this is Dr. Joel Shertok, President of Process Industries Consultants, a chemical engineering consultancy located in Newark, Delaware. Well, hello, everybody. This is Joel Shertok, chemical engineer, and this is a continuing of my podcast on chemical technology and survey of the modern chemical process industry and its auxiliaries. Today, we're going to take a little deviation from the usual, and we're going to be talking to Justin Duplantis of Zedlbit about bioinformatics. And it's very good because I know absolutely nothing about bioinformatics except it's a name. The easiest thing to start with, Justin, is welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Should be interesting. So for those of us who don't know anything about it, can you describe bioinformatics to somebody like me who knows nothing about it?
Sure. Yeah. So we're large data set analysis. The easiest way that I like to explain it to people, because I have to on a regular basis, I live in a very remote town, so most people don't know the biotech industry or even the scientific world very well at all, is if you look at a Venn diagram, we're kind of the center between math, biology, and computer science. So it's using computer coding to basically analyze large genomic data sets. So we deal with single-cell RNA-seq data, bulk RNA-seq data, genome-wide association studies. So all these wonderful buzzwords that if you read any type of article you hear, but basically what it is we're taking a sample that's being processed through a sequencing machine, brings out all the different proteins that make up the human genome, and we're analyzing that against a control or looking for mutations in that so that we can find out more information about oncology or diseases. And we do it not only for the human side of things, which of course we do a lot of human work, but also for animals and plants. So anything can really be sequenced so that you can find the genetic makeup of that.
So basically you take raw data that comes from those DNA sequencing and you mathematically analyze it?
Yeah, exactly. So we create custom pipelines and workflows. So we're creating basically a custom software, if you will, through coding and able to process that data through there so we can get more usable information than basically a library of just data. So we're analyzing this data, creating plots, making it a more usable format for scientists to be able to do their research.
And basically what you can do is you can look for anomalies by comparing different sets.
Correct. Yes, we're looking for genetic mutations that cause specific, indications.
Okay. So the old vision of a guy with glasses and a bald head with a magnifying glass doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, I think that person's still there. That's the lab person, and then it ends up turning into more like the nerdy guy in his basement slapping on the keyboards to create the analysis and the volcano plots and all that fun stuff. So it's more usable for the bald guy to interpret.
Okay, that is fantastic. So how does Zedlbit get involved in this? How do you get involved in it?
Yeah, so basically there's different stages within the research lifecycle. So we start off with public data set curation. So there are public data sets out there, such as CCLE or TCGA, that specifically have a large biobank for oncology patients. So they have a huge database that we can actually pull from and analyze that data to try to get more insights out of. There's also a UK Biobank is a huge one. I believe they have 150,000 genomes within it, and that's good for rare disease, stuff like that. So we're able to pull and curate that data for the client, and then we do the analysis on the back end as well. Once they're ready and they say, okay, we've validated the information we think this specific gene is causing this specific disease, we can then go and help them with experimental design and say, okay, this is kind of how you want to design your experiment. They go and they get their samples. We get them sent off and do the sequencing ourselves as well, and then have proprietary data that we're going to be analyzing. we can analyze that data and compare it to the publicly available data sets to show validation between what their hypothesis was through publicly available data sets and their proprietary data sets that we've created for them and compared the two. So kind of in that full gamut of the research process.
And you do statistics too, I imagine, on the results.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So, and your profit stream comes from basically you're a gun for hire, I assume.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think there's a pretty large misconception on our business model. I think a lot of people think that we are plugging into companies that have no bioinformatics capacity. And so we're serving as our internal bioinformatics department, which 100% is accurate. We do that on occasion, but the primary client of ours are large organizations that actually have internal capacity already. So they'll have pretty robust bioinformatics department. But with bioinformatics, how it works, which I think is pretty logical, you get a large amount of data all at one time.
Yep.
So it's very much of an ebb and flow in business and work that has coming in, right? So if you get a large amount of data all at one time, it's very overwhelming for a bioinformatician to kind of handle. And then there's times where it's pretty quiet. So we're that person that plugs in when the time is right and there's a lot of data that comes in. They say, okay, look, let's bring you in for 6 months to help process this data or create a pipeline. Or it may be a situation where they have a roadmap to some innovative stuff that they're trying to build internally. So their bioinformaticians are working on building out new workflows and they don't want to have to worry about this new data that's coming in that's more mundane. So we can help out with that side as well. But the majority of our clients have internal capacity. We help them with scalability, tight deadlines, specialty analysis that they may not have in-house for. So we're dealing with not just the CEO that needs internal bioinformatics support, but we're also helping people that have robust internal bioinformatics departments with their scalability.
So basically, you act as search capacity.
Yeah, so we help them a lot with like short-term kind of sprints to the finish line, especially when you're talking about you needing investor money, right? The investors say, "Hey, I need this results now." So
Yeah.
we come in, help them for a short period of time, and then whenever they need us, they call on us.
That sounds like it must be interesting portfolio of products since it changes every day, I would think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I have the best job, I think, potentially in the world. I love being able to interact with different organizations and hearing. I mean, have a client that's talking about potatoes one day, and then my very next call, we're talking about algae, and then we talk about animal health, and I talk to the American Dental Association about some research they're doing on gingivitis potentially, and then we move on to a client working on brain cancer. My son's a brain cancer survivor, actually. So, real passionate about on the brain tumor side. But so it's never a dull moment for sure, dealing with not only multiple different types of diseases within humans, but different organisms as well.
Very, very good. So how do you fit into the organization? What's your specific role?
Yeah, so I'm the business manager here. So I deal with basically everything that's not scientific.
Okay.
I do have
You're the
the
non-nerd.
Yeah, so I deal with the finances, which is super fun. I do the legal, client services, project management, basically again, like everything that's not on the scientific side. Obviously, I've got a analytical chemistry background with an MBA in data analytics. So I understand, kind of what we're doing pretty well, but I'm not a bioinformatician myself, but help those bridge that gap between generally our clients that we're dealing with in the early stages are not bioinformaticians either. So bridging that gap between the layman that doesn't understand the bioinformatics side of things, and then our bioinformaticians that are super technical and sometimes have a hard time kind of bridging that gap. Some kind of that go between for them that can help with that translation.
So you're the guy who gets yelled at by both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah. We try to minimize that as much as possible, of course. I think our main objective in hiring bioinformaticians is not only to hire wonderful scientists that know the industry really well, but have to be client interfacing. So that client interfacing piece is as important as the scientific side.
Yeah, I know. And during my career, I met people who were incredibly talented technically, but you didn't dare let them meet a client.
We've had those issues in the past. I think we've decided that that's not really a good fit for our model. I think there's some companies that have an extra layer of project management between the bioinformatician and the client, which works out fine, and they can have that interpretation stage. But we prefer to pull back the curtain a little bit and allow the bioinformaticians to interface directly with the clients. The clients don't have to play the game of telephone. It's more efficient that way, and they feel like they have that one-on-one interaction that they're able to just ping somebody that knows what they're talking about and get a response, very quickly We have a 24-hour response time to all inquiries from clients. So it allows for a more streamlined process, but it does make it a little bit more difficult in the hiring process for sure.
Yeah, I went to work for one organization where their chief technical guy was one of those eccentrics, and the guy said, "Yeah, what we do is we slip the problem through a slit, and we slip food through the slit, and he puts the answer out through the slit, and
Yeah.
once a year, open the door and talk to him, and we say, yeah, same psychosis, and close the door for another year."
I've been in those environments before. It's kind of tough to navigate that way, but so I'm happy with the way we've decided to kind of build the organization.
Okay, so as an operations guy, which you kind of are,
Mhm.
what were some of the improvements you put in place when you came into the organization?
Yeah, I think the we have a more streamlined approach, I think, on especially on handling clients. So what I mean by that is originally we would create these giant scopes of work. There would be a very detailed outlining of this is kind of what the project looks like. And I think there's a time and place for that. I've worked in other environments where that was appropriate. Here, with bioinformatics, it's a different beast, right? There's a lot of iterations that have to be done. There's lots of scope creep. So if you have something that's a very detailed scope of work and it's in a contract where all the parties are signing off on, everything else has to be in writing. So we're changing. We're actually wanting to make a shift and not do this type of analysis. We want to build out, let's say instead of doing volcano plots, we want an R Shiny app build out so the client can play with the data themselves. Well, we got to draft that again and send it through legal. So I think that was one of the things that I implemented was more of a broad umbrella consulting agreement that's sent off to clients now so they can just broadly agree to us helping them with bioinformatics support. And then we can obviously have emails back and forth as far as a less detailed scope. So we still have the details of the project in writing, but we don't have it under the legal umbrella where it's in a contract where we have to adjust and have appendices over and over again. Because what we were finding is you're spending more time in the legal department than you are doing scientific research, which
Absolutely.
is not beneficial to anybody. And of course, it's without an attorney on retainer full time, you're having to deal with the companies having to pay those attorneys, and it wasn't cost effective for them either. So streamlining that process has helped a lot, not only with advancing research at a quicker pace, but also reducing the cost for the clients on the legal side.
Fantastic. So part of your job is definitely balancing competing interests, and obviously your company has to make money too. You're not designed to be a charity. So how do you balance the need to make a profit, the need to be scientific, the need to keep the customers happy, the need to keep productivity up? I mean, how do you balance all those different competing things to come to some sort of optimum?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for us, our main objective is taking care of the client. I think if you're honest with clients, it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain sometimes, right? I've had clients that have come to me and said, "Can you deal in this specific, really niche analysis?" And I've gone to them and said, "Okay, look, we have two options. You have option one, which is the cheap option. We have someone that's on our team that can stumble their way through this analysis, or I can bring in this person from the outside that I know that's an expert created the type of analysis. So specifically, I'm thinking of Mendelian randomization. We have the experts in that industry that actually created Mendelian randomization. I can bring them in, but their rate's going to be significantly higher. So the question is, do you want superior analysis or do you want to just get by? And it depends on the client, right? Sometimes getting by is sufficient and that's fine.
Sometimes
But
quick
I
and
think
dirty does the trick.
100%, right? And the thing about bioinformatics is you can spend 90% of your time getting 50% of the analysis done. The other 10% takes the other 50, is the other 50% of the
Yep.
analysis. It's an interesting industry where sometimes we can say, okay, how much do we need to go this much further down the road? And sometimes it's necessary and sometimes it's not. But I think rather than just saying, hey, look, we're going to go all the way to the end and get every single finite detail instead of like a rough sketch on a napkin, it's going to cost the client more, the company's going to make more, but it's not, in my opinion, not the most ethical way of handling the business. So a lot of times we end up cutting down what the client's looking for in order to give them more cost effective options, which they appreciate because obviously in this industry, it's all about the dollar, right? And they're having to try to scrape and find money, especially when we're dealing with early stage research and development teams, right? So we're not dealing with the companies that have multi-million dollars to spend on kind of bioinformatics resources. Those companies generally have their internal
Staff.
team. They have their internal team, and they'll calling us occasionally, but the clients that are our mainstays are the ones that are, just seed stage or Series A funded organizations that we're trying to help out. So when they see that we care about their money as much as they do, there's that appreciation and we can grow as they grow.
I mean, I see similar things as a chemical engineering consultant that I tend to work more with startups because big companies got their own staff. They don't need somebody. But if you're dealing with a startup, money always, it's a perpetual struggle for cash and cash and cash and cash and cash.
Yes.
So,
Yes. It's always that. And then especially again in the early stage R&D, right? It's different. It's different when you're getting to the commercialization stage. Usually they've scraped together enough money where they can go out and try to get commercialization, at which point, that's when, life gets good for them. But we're at that really early stage where they know not only are they scraping up cash now, but they're going to need a lot in the future. By the time they get to commercialization, they're like, look, hey, we can blow whatever we have left because we know that all we need to do is sell this and commercialize it. And so they're kind of at the late stages, but we're so far up the stream that the people are trying to conserve the funds as much as possible.
very, very interesting. So obviously your stuff is on the cutting edge by definition. What major changes have you seen in the last 2, 3 years?
Yeah, I think obviously AI has been a huge thing, right? I think in any industry you're seeing the advent of AI. I think and I was just talking to my wife about this yesterday, actually. I think there's this misconception that bioinformatics will become obsolete in a short time because of artificial intelligence. Wholeheartedly disagree with that sentiment. We've seen people try to put together pipelines with AI and say, okay, create me a single cell RNA-seq pipeline, and they get the code, but it's not usable. And what I relate it to is, ask AI to build you a perfect human hand, and it struggles pretty hard. You'll have an extra finger here and there, and so it's a similar situation. You still need a bioinformatician, even if you decide you're going to create a pipeline. You still need a bioinformatician to dissect that code, or somebody that understands code really well, whether it's Python or R or whatever, and going through that code and saying, okay, this is where it's broken. And I would argue, the times at least I've seen, it seems it's more trouble than it's worth for the dissection of the code. So it ends up being more time effective just to build it from scratch, or pulling in, not necessarily writing all the code from scratch, but pulling in existing tools and packages that you're aware of, and kind of splice them together to make a pipeline that's appropriate for your use case, as opposed to trying to create it from scratch using AI. But I think there's those individuals that aren't familiar with bioinformatics really well, that they hear AI, 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 and so that's a big question that they have. Can you utilize AI to improve this process or whatever? And I think there's a time and a place for it, certainly, but I think in what we're doing as a business, we're using machine learning where it's kind of like the precursor to AI. So there's some of that, built into what we do, but it's not to the extent where I think people are thinking that it's going to be useful.
Yeah, I mean, AI is a tool, and like any other tool, you don't use a screwdriver, you need a wrench.
Sure, 100%.
And
Yep.
some people do that, and it doesn't work very well.
It's great to find restaurants locally. I'm on Gemini all the time saying that this is the type of food I like. This is what kind of family I have. What is your suggestion for this restaurant? Write me a love poem for my wife. Gemini's great for that, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I mean,
for
I have
bioinformatics workflows.
it's I find that it helps write reports. I mean, instead of having to search Google one thing at a time, you put it in, it gives you everything. It's basically super Google. That's the best
Yeah,
way.
it's what we use it for at Zedlbit pretty often is for contract review. So I manually go through the contracts myself, and then I also say, well, let's see, in case I miss anything, copy and paste the agreement into Gemini and say, is there anything that's kind of out of the ordinary from this contract that I should be aware of, just as like a second set of eyes, right? I'd like to have that. Same thing goes for like if we need a policy and procedure created, um, like, okay, we need this operational policy, whatever, in place. And so I'll have Gemini take the first stab at it, and I'll go through and edit it and make sure that it's appropriate. Nothing out of the box is great, but it at least gives me a starting point. So I'm not writing, 8 pages of stuff from scratch. I can go in there and edit it. So I definitely use it for that within the company.
Very, very, yeah, it's very, very interesting. So somebody's listening to this and saying, "Boy, this sounds really, really great. I want to get into it." What skill sets should this person have to be successful in a job like yours?
Yeah, I think definitely a scientific background is helpful, right? If we're talking about specifically in the business management space for a highly technical environment, right? Like you do definitely need to have some sort of scientific background. I think even though it's unrelated, so that my analytical chemistry doesn't exactly integrate really well with bioinformatics, I think that's important, but also having some sort of scientific background combined with the will to learn. That was one of the things when I started here. I was kind of in the same boat. I didn't know anything about bioinformatics, had never even heard of it. I was pretty concerned. I first kind of broke into it from an individual that owned a bioinformatics company, and we knew each other from a social setting. And he said, "Look, you're a bright guy and have some sort of scientific background. I think you could really, do really well in this environment." And so I told him that probably was a bad idea. I didn't know anything about it, and so dove, kind of headfirst into it. Got my a certification in R so I could learn how to code a little bit, even though I wasn't going to be coding myself, to at least have the breadth of knowledge to be able to talk to it eloquently. And then also got my AWS certification for Amazon Web Services because that's what we were using internally for all of our cloud computing and cloud storage. So if a client asked, like, what do you guys do? I can explain to them how we spin up an EC2 instance or whatever. So I could speak more eloquently to it. So that's why I got my MBA in data analytics specifically, so that I could speak to the industry a little bit better. Although I wasn't going to be performing it, it's tough to have an intro call with a PhD in biotechnology, and they're asking you very technical questions, and you're not able to answer those questions. So
Yeah, I gotta get back to you.
right, and that's appropriate at times still, right? Sometimes they get, as I say, you're getting too sciencey for me, and then we have to bring in a bioinformatician or our head of informatics to kind of thwart those calls. But now I've gotten to the point, being in the industry for I think almost 7 years now, that I can field most of the questions that the people have, at least before we get into project specifics or have an NDA in place or whatever.
Fantastic. So, because you are a cutting edge technology, I'm sure that the technology changes on a relatively rapid basis. How do you make sure that, how do you foster a continuous improvement environment that you're on top of what's going on in the industry?
Yeah, I think, we have a head of informatics that's Alex Mahalovich, who really makes sure that he's kind of staying on top of the new trends that are going on. He's an avid reader, keeping kind of abreast of new articles that are coming out, and then he disseminates that to the team. I think obviously we have team members, and it's important to have team members that have that same mentality of wanting to stay up to date on everything that's going on. But also we also understand that the practicality of that is not everyone is kind of in that boat. So that's why our head of informatics is so vital, because he's the one that can disseminate that information and say, hey, let's take a look at this. He also is kind of more of like, a mini project manager, if you will. So he's aware of all the projects, disseminates it out to the team, and then he's able to oversee, make sure that everything's running smoothly. Kind of have a second set of eyes. It's not going to be obviously not going to be me on the scientific side. So I think it's important just to kind of stay abreast. LinkedIn is a great resource. People are posting all the time. We try to, again, do the same thing. We see something that's interesting, that's our field related, and disseminate it out. I'm a member of a bioinformatics group on LinkedIn. So when I see postings that are relevant, kind of trying to pass those out to the team and make sure that we're kind of on the cutting edge. Luckily, I think most of our bioinformaticians just have that love for the industry, and naturally are kind of in those circles that I'm in as well, and getting those articles filtering through their desk. I think it's just a matter of getting those details to the right people, and they're able to review them. It's a team environment, right? We have a team chat so that everyone's kind of abreast, and even though we're all fully remote, we're able to work as a team and a collective in that sense, where we're able to disseminate and share information.
Very, very good. Because you're in a unique situation and a unique business, could you kind of think about the one personal characteristic that you need to have to be successful?
Yeah, I would say hungry is for sure the case. I think one of the things that's difficult about business management in such a technical field uh, is there's not always a need for it, right? We're not selling a pair of shoes. You walk into a shoe store and I know that you need a pair of shoes. I'm gonna sell you a pair of shoes, and it's an instant gratification. You come in, the sales cycle is super short, right? Walk in, you walk out within an hour, and sales are done. Here, it's quite difficult. Sales cycles are very long. You're looking at 9 to 18 months for a sales cycle from the first touch. So you're having to follow up with clients. As I jokingly say, I think my title needs to be changed from business manager to professional stalker, because that's a lot of what I do. I'm sending 13 to 20 messages probably before we actually have an initial call, much less a closed deal. So it just takes a long time. If you're not accustomed to rejection, it's going to be a really tough environment to work in. I just had a client call right before this, and they basically shared, okay, yeah, this sounds great. We want to get started, and then we say, okay, like, what are you looking to get your data in? When is this going to start? Like 3 to 4 months. So that's a pretty common conversation, right? So you have the clients that are interested in talking to you have data that's going to be ready, but maybe not right now. So then you have to follow up, and I think being hungry and saying, okay, although we haven't closed this out yet. We know that it's a potential, and make sure we're keeping organized and following up those people. If you're soft-hearted, it's probably not the right fit. You're talking to a lot of people before you get a yes answer. We do need your support. And I just had a client call maybe a month ago. I've been reaching out to that person for almost 4 years now, just kind of checking in intermittently and saying, hey, is there anything else? And we've never worked together ever. And we're about to sign an agreement with them to start some work for the first time in the 4 years I've been reaching out. So you have to be hungry and go out there and just continue to try to cultivate those relationships.
That's exactly the challenge I have as a consultant in my own particular field. Is one of my colleagues once said, "You have to kiss a lot of pigs before you get a prince."
Yes, a lot of doors slammed in your face. But it's funny because I guess I was I've been in the sales field for almost, well, I guess, gosh, over 20 years now. You know, I've not unfamiliar with rejection, transitioning to this environment where you're looking at, instead of, oh, we're our goal, in another environment, maybe a 15 to 20% conversion rate. We're looking here like more like a 1 to 2%. It's a big adjustment for me. It was definitely a big adjustment, but I enjoy it. I think it's just, yeah, it's tough. You have to kind of, you have to have a lot of confidence in what you do and your organization. And so when you're having those conversations, you lean on the great conversations, and you kind of push back the ones that are ignoring you, or that decide they're going to go with another firm for whatever reason. So you just kind of have to push those aside.
Very good. That's a very fantastic. I get this. There's not that much difference between being in your shoes and being a Philibert salesman.
And I would agree with that sentiment.
Which is pretty funny. So thank you for that. This is sort of the technical portion of the podcast. I'd like to have some personal questions as well. So the first personal question is, what is one thing about you that people who know you would be surprised about?
Yeah, so I've got a couple interesting things. I'm a hockey player and have a nonprofit hockey organization we run down here in East Texas. It's a completely free program to the community. So my wife and I cover the cost. They don't pay registration or for equipment or for skates or anything like that. We provide all of that. It's roller hockey. I play ice hockey, and this past weekend I actually just got signed with a team, a semi-professional team up in New York, flying back and forth doing that. That's the good thing about working remotely, playing semi-professional hockey. Previously played professional hockey overseas. Interesting fact for people. And then another one would be, I'm signed with a pool cube manufacturer as a sponsored player. I played on the Pro Tour for a while for billiards as well.
Wow.
A couple interesting
So
interesting things I've
you're a
done.
hustler.
Yeah, a couple interesting things I've done at a high level. So hockey and pool are two of my loves for sure.
You're amazing to have all your teeth.
Yeah, I'm a goalie, so the full face mask helps out with that for sure.
Well, I remember in the good old days, which is like the 50s or the 60s, if you were a goalie, you had no teeth and black eye and a broken nose because they
Very
considered
rough.
wearing a mask effeminate. They looked at you. What do you mean? The mask? Are you kidding?
a hundred
And
percent.
the French hockey players from Canada, they looked like they were in a bar fight.
It was
They were
rough.
all messed up.
Very rough. Yeah. I remember I think it was Don Cheevers, I believe, is the one of the first guys to start wearing a face mask. And yeah, he was antagonized quite a bit, but what he did was every time he got hit in the face, he'd put a scar on his face mask. And when asked like why he had the scars on his face, he said, well, everyone makes fun of me for wearing the mask, but for every scar that I have on my face, that's one additional game that I got to play that player didn't, because that goalie was out for an injury. I'm saving my career by not being out for injuries with these scars. And even with the mask, it was so tight on the face. I'm sure it hurt like crazy.
Just the vibration would get you.
I
It's just the
I would
impact.
imagine it'd be super painful. I mean, the masks we wear now, I mean, they're made of Kevlar. It's like a bulletproof mask. It doesn't hurt at all.
But
We
yeah,
don't get
back then
like
it's all plastic, basically.
yeah, and you don't even get like the ringing. Like when I was a kid growing up, you would get ringing in your ears if you got hit. Now the helmets are so well padded, you don't even get ringing or anything. You just get hit and you move on. You may bend your cage a little bit, which I have some definitely have some bent cages on some of my helmets, but there's no pain on that end.
I remember in baseball, they used to, not wear any sort of head protection at all. Just wear a cloth cap, and guys would get beamed, and that'd be the end of their career. If they were lucky, that was the end of their career.
And now they have all kind of crazy things. Now I was watching a game the other day, and I don't really watch baseball very often, but I noticed they have like gloves now that they wear for like sliding, so they don't like jam their fingers on the bases and stuff. So looks like oven mitts. So I guess every sport's kind of getting more protected.
Yeah, football's next. There's been just too many traumatic brain injuries now. People begin to yell and scream that something has to be done.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're going to go because like in practices they have those padded kind of helmet covers to help with that. I wonder if that's going to be something they're going to end up transitioning to. Because like with hockey, right? Like we've had a couple of people that have had got their throats cut with blades. Very rare, but I think what really did it, they had a goalie that had it happen maybe a few years ago, and they got to him on the ice really quickly, and it was fine. But they had one recently overseas, and it was just a crazy situation where the guy kind of falls, the skate comes up high. There was some speculation whether he did it intentionally or not. I mean, not intentionally meaning, you know, cutting somebody, but slinging his foot in the air, whether that was intentional. But regardless, is deceased now. So that kind of really got the attention. That really got the attention of the hockey community as a whole. So what they've done is they've implemented the necessity of having throat guards now. So now,
Really? Like what Jets?
yeah, so that way.
Yeah, like the old-time cavalry people against, so people couldn't put a sword against your throat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they're doing that now. I think it's this season, or I think it was either last season or this upcoming season. It's a requirement of everybody in the NHL to wear, these throat protectors just to be safe, right? It's pretty infrequent, but you'd rather be safe than sorry for,
Yeah,
it's
unless
just a
you're the
small
one, in
one.
which case it's 100%.
Right, right.
Really interesting. So everybody in their careers had a mentor. Who mentored you?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think what and I thought about this coming into this interview. I think what's interesting, I think most people know their mentor. They know they're being mentored, and that wasn't really my case. I think I didn't take full advantage of it like I should have. I worked for a live events organization where we were helping with setting up booths and stuff at conferences, which was helpful in what I do now because I do conferences, and so I'm having to design the booths and stuff. But we also did like smaller live events, but we were a live events company hired by Procter and Gamble and some other Cricket Wireless and some other companies to kind of put on live events for them. And my boss there, she told me something one day, and I'll never forget it. It was really frustrating, and I'd come to her because there was an issue with an event, and I said, I don't know what to do. This is kind of the problem. This is probably, I don't know. I was there maybe 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. I was working in the company. No, not that long. It must have been 10, about 10 years ago. So she said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, I don't know. That's why I'm coming to you. This is why I'm frustrated. I don't know what to do. Well, go think about it and come back and tell me what you're gonna do about it. And I was very frustrated, very frustrated, and didn't really understand why she wasn't willing to help. And her mantra was, "Don't come to me with a problem. Come to me with a problem and the solution. And that way, we can work through the solution if you already have an idea. But we want kind of to coach you to critically think." And I think for the most part, I, I I was pretty proactive. I wasn't the one that just kind of throw my hands up in the air. So I think that's why it was also frustrating because I generally was that person. But in this situation, I really was at a loss. But it made me kind of think outside the box and dig a little bit deeper. And it changed my mentality completely. Of like, okay, I don't need to now, worry about what if I make the wrong decision. I can still, talk to somebody, talk to a supervisor, somebody that knows more and get some feedback. But Jamie was hugely helpful in my career on that sense. And I don't even know if she knows what kind of impact she had on that front. But I think for me, seeing her, and she had been in the live events space for ages, and there it's always something's on fire always with this live event. There's always issues
It's a
going on.
live
There's always
event.
problems. Yeah, there's always something going on. But she was able to kind of coach me into, I'm very type A, so stressed out all the time, and so she's like, it's gonna be fine. It'll work out, but I don't think it will. And I think just being able to step back and be more calm and collected. I would argue that the reason I'm working in the bioinformatics space is because of that. The reason that I met the person that I alluded to earlier, that we were friends from a social setting. I ran an international conference where we met. And I think that I wouldn't have been able to do that organization of that conference in a way that was well organized, and I was pretty easygoing at the conference and did all my due diligence to make sure it ran well at the upfront. And that's where he met me and said, "Wow, you very well organized. You run a great conference." I don't think that would have happened without that direction that I got from her. And the same thing goes now, right? Like I think people are in the biotech industry think that things are on fire, but it's nothing compared to a live event.
Oh
Like
yeah.
right now it's like okay, I know this is serious, let me get you an answer, and I get them an answer within like 3 hours, and they're elated because they're used to getting answers within 2 weeks, but I'm used to getting answers within minutes. So I think it's a different environment. I brought that with me to this industry, and I think it's been a huge impact on client services. Like I said, 24-hour response time for all of our bioinformaticians. I have generally about an hour response time for most of my correspondence. So that client service side of things is pretty unusual within the biotech industry when the standard is a week to 2 weeks for a response. They're getting these very quick responses, and it makes them feel like they're the only client and they're very important to us, which I think helps us with obviously longevity and client services.
Yeah, well, that's your differentiation.
Percent. Yeah, I mean it's almost become a commodity at this point, right? Like I think there are some artistic sides of bioinformatics where people write code and they're able to get better results, and it is dependent on the specific person you have working on the project. But because there's so many publicly available tools, it's almost been commoditized like sequencing is. But we're able to bring in another aspect of it where we can say, look, we're gonna be there for whatever you need, and whether it's a weekend or a night, we're always available for you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I remember I once used to organize an annual party for my synagogue, and we used the Masonic Hall because one of the guys was a Mason. And we had an event planned, and I did all my due diligence. I spoke to the guy. I said, "Yep, everything is there, Joe. Not a problem. We're all set for you." Blah 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 blah. So I walk in 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Party starts at 5, and there's nothing there. It's an absolutely empty room. There's nothing there. It's Sunday. No one's around to call. Well, hell, what do you do? What do you do? So we just had to organize. Asked all the other synagogues, "Hey, do you got tables and benches that we can borrow?" Yep. Organized carpools to bring it in, and it worked. I mean, by the time 5 o'clock, it looked like nothing ever happened.
Well, I think the key, right? You made a really good point. The key was you showed up there at 1 o'clock to make sure everything was going to go smoothly. Getting there early and making sure that that you have all your ducks in a row is important. We're doing, I had alluded to the fact that we're doing a free hockey program. We have our first ever fundraiser. We've been around for 3 years now. We've never done like a really large scale fundraiser. Doing our first one September the 20th. We've got a silent auction that we're going to have online so people can kind of go and bid on things. But we're also going to be doing like a gun raffle, which is really big down here. And we've got vendors. We've got 43, I believe, vendors that are
Wow.
coming to the event. So I've just gone through and like organized. I went to the park that we're going to be holding the event at and mapped out exactly where the vendors are going to be. So, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to definitely send out a message before and say, look, let's have grace with each other. Okay, vendors, let's have grace with each other. It's going to be, we're probably going to have some hiccups, and we just need to have grace and say, look, I understand that I'm going to frustrate you. You're probably going to frustrate me, but let's just try to let's try to get through this together. With a lot of people, there's going to be a lot of questions.
Yep.
I've
Things are
created
going to go
this
wrong.
100%.
Guaranteed.
And I created this comprehensive map, right? But certainly someone's going to come up to me and say, hey, where am I supposed to be? Even though I've got a map, I'm going to send it out a month early. I'm going to have it all laid out and everything. But there's going to be questions, and I'm wearing a neon yellow shirt and hat so that everyone can find me. So trying to think of all those things. In addition to all the vendors, we're having a classic car show that same day. We're going to have food trucks there. So it's going to be hopefully quite the large shindig, and we're going to have lots of traffic and raise some good money for our hockey program. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have to know that there's going to be issues, and I plan on, the event starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm planning on being there 8:30 in the morning, even if it is just standing there. I want to be there super early so that I can kind of greet everybody and make sure that everything goes smoothly.
Very, very, very good. So, one final question: what would you be doing if you weren't doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's interesting. I was kind of a lost soul for a really long time. Went to college for analytical chemistry, decided I was going to go to law school, didn't pan out, and then kind of got into the business world. I did retail for a while. retail management, and then found myself outside of retail, and then worked in modeling and acting academies, and kind of done a pretty odd kind of trajectory to get to where I'm at today. Really love the biotech industry. I think one of my passions, and potentially still could be a path for me upon retirement, is the educational system. I really enjoy teaching. I originally wanted to be a high school chemistry teacher, and my high school chemistry teacher said, "Please don't do that. You're meant for more, and it's going to be really frustrating." And I wouldn't do that. And she retired the year after I graduated. I didn't go that route, but I think I have a passion for education. I two boys. I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they're both hockey players, but also that we do homeschool with them. So I teach the math section because I love math. I was in math competitions growing up, and so love the math side of things. So I teach the math section for the homeschool, and then the science section as well, of course. But they do a homeschool co-op on Wednesdays, and one semester I was the teacher, but I kind of didn't get fired, but I kind of was like, they were like, "Thank you for your time." I think I was a bit too a bit too technical for the students. Most of the homeschool kids aren't getting into like the nitty gritty of science, and I was going over some.
Getting too granular for their liking.
Yeah, I mean, we were going over mitochondria, and I was all
Oh,
excited about it and everything. And I mean, these are supposed to be high school level kids, right? But they're kind of looking at it saying, "I'm not even sure what a mammal is," because they have different levels of
yeah.
education for homeschool. So some of them looking at me saying they weren't sure what a mammal was, and I was talking about Golgi apparatus. So we had to, well, yeah, maybe not the
We have
best
here's a
fit for me.
player to communicate.
Yeah, maybe not the best fit for me. So I think gifted education at a high school level would be something I would be potentially interested in a post career. So we'll see how that pans out.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, again, thank you for your time. This is really, really fascinating.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And let's thank Justin for his time and talking about bioinformatics. We're now semi-experts and know just enough to be dangerous.
There you go. Like I say, you know enough to get yourself in trouble, but not enough to get yourself out of it.
That's correct. Hey, thanks a million for your time.
Thank you.
Have a
Cheers.
nice day.